Reading pie charts. We're going to work through an example here of a very typical GCSE style question on reading pie charts. Now here we have a pie chart showing the favourite foods of 180 students. So the favourite possible food types were Thai, Indian, Chinese and pizza. And the question we're asked is which takeaway food was the favourite of a quarter of these students. So remember, a quarter means one whole one divided into 4 equal sections. So which one of these sections looks like a quarter? Well, if we look carefully, the one that looks like a quarter is Indian. So the favourite food of a quarter of the students was Indian. Another way of thinking about this is thinking, well, remember that it's 360 degrees around the centre point. So if we're talking about a quarter, we want to think about what is a quarter of 360 degrees. Well, a quarter of 360 degrees is, if we think about 36 divided by 4, that's 9. So 360 divided by 4 is 90. So which section is 90 degrees? And that is Indian. Part B says, what fraction of these students chose Chinese? Now this sometimes might say, what fraction of these students like Chinese best and in its simplest form? Well, if we look, the section for Chinese is 120 degrees. So we've got 120 degrees and we're dividing that by the 360 degrees that we have around the point. So the fraction that Chinese represents is 120 out of 360 degrees, which if we were to simplify, well, remember, because they both end in zeros, we can divide by 10, so that's 12 out of 36, which is the same as 6 over 18, which is the same as 1 over 3. So the fraction of students who like Chinese best was 120 out of 360, or in its simplest form, 1 out of 3 students. It says work out the size of the angle for Thai students. So we're looking to calculate this section here. Now what we do know is we know that around this point there is 360 degrees, and we know 3 of the angles already. So if we add up these angles we already know and see what we need to get to 360 degrees, we should find out what angle represents Thai food. So we need to add together 90 degrees, add on 100 degrees, add on 120 degrees. And if we add them together, we get 310 degrees. And what do we need to get from 310 degrees to 360 degrees? Well, we need to add on 50 degrees. So Thai is 50 degrees. And finally, how many of the 180 students chose pizza? So we know, yet again, that it's 360 degrees around the point. And we know that in our survey 180 students were asked. So we need to find out how much one person's worth. If we know that 180 students are worth 360 degrees, we want to know what one student's worth in degrees. So how do we get from 180 to 1 degrees? Well, we divide by 180. So we must divide 360 by 180. So 180 divided by 360 divided by 180 is 2 degrees. So each student is worth 2 degrees. But we're told that the pizza is 100 degrees. So we know that we've actually got 100 degrees. So what do we times 2 by to get to 100? Because that will tell us what we need to times the students by to find out how many students we've got. So 2 to get to 100 we times by 50. So we've got to times 1 by 50 to find that there's 50 students who liked pizza best. So we need to find out what one student's worth by doing 360 divided by whatever the total number of frequency is. In this case it's 180. To find out what one student is, so one student's worth 2 degrees. Then we need to think, well, what do we times 2 by to get to 100 once we've found one person, and we times it by 50, so that means we've got 50 students. And this is a very typical question that you could be asked in a GCSE exam, where you'll be asked to find a missing angle, might be asked to find a fraction, and you might be asked to find out the number of people in a certain section.